All right, I know y'all have already read about the NCTM principles last week, but I just wanted the opportunity to talk to you about it just a little while. The first one is the equity principle. And I think it's really important that you guys understand that that does not necessarily mean that you treat every student the same way all the time. You'll find this to be true also when you're a parent. You don't tend to treat your children exactly the same because they're different people and they respond better to different things. They like different things. So the same thing is going to be true for your students. They're all different people. They all respond differently to things. They all like things differently than one another. And so you tend to treat them a little bit differently because of that. The main thing with the equity principle is that you are pushing every student to achieve to their fullest potential. That is when you know you're really meeting what this standard, sorry, is asking you for. That you're really pushing those students forward to achieve the best they can. So think for me a good sentence about how you can master this standard in your future classroom. All right, the second principle is the curriculum principle. And I think it's very important to notice that curriculum is spread from K through 12. It's not just the textbook that you're going to get this year. A lot of people consider that your curriculum, and that's not necessarily true. That is something you're going to use to teach the curriculum, but the curriculum itself is the important mathematics that carry through from grade to grade, semester to semester. One particular thing that they comment on the top of page 29 is I'm sorry, on the bottom of page 29, Elliot Eisner, it has a statement there from him. Students may learn as much by virtue of the way teachers structure their classroom as from the books they use. So, just a personal experience of that. I homeschooled my children, sixth grade through eighth grade, and as we were homeschooling, I did not allow them to use calculators. I wanted them to understand mathematics, I wanted them to be able to do mathematics, and so I just did not allow them to use calculators at all. Then in eighth grade, when they were in Algebra 1, I decided, well, I'll let them use the calculator on their tests because they do need to be well versed in the calculator before they get to high school Algebra 2. I knew the teacher they were going to have, and she expected them to use the calculator well. So I told them, you are allowed to use your calculator. Most of the time, to be honest with you, they just wouldn't. It wasn't worth it to them to go pick it up. They were so accustomed to using their brains and so not having that attachment to the calculator that we see from some students that they just preferred not to. So that was just a way that I structured their classroom that ended up impacting probably as much as, if not more than, the textbooks that we chose to use. Also, I think this is important in Common Core. I think Common Core has done a really good job. South Carolina State Standards as well. They're essentially synonymous K through 8. But the standards there do a really good job of building from grade to grade, from year to year. The standards that we had before these were a little bit choppier. They had more things in some grades. It didn't necessarily carry over as well. But I do think for the most part, they're not perfect, obviously, but for the most part, I feel like they made some good adjustments with the way that they are doing the standards for you guys in making that curriculum kind of flow from K through 12. Okay, so same thing, think about a way that you can master this standard in your future classroom. Give me a good sentence about that. All right, the third one is the teaching principle. And there is no one right way to teach. I think that's probably one of the biggest things from this particular one. One of the guest speakers that we're going to have later in the semester, Miss Kelly Mew, when I used to teach at Saluda Trail, I taught eighth grade, she taught seventh grade, she was my department head. And I can tell you that Kelly and I teach very, very differently. If you were to walk into my classroom and you were to walk into her classroom, I don't know that you would find much of anything that was the same. But her students were successful and my students were successful. It's not that somebody is doing better, it's just that they do things differently. And your student is going to respond usually to what is the best thing that you feel most comfortable with. They're going to jump right in there and respond because you're happy and you're excited, and they're going to go with you on that. So I think that's a really big deal on the teaching standard because I feel like often we look at the person who is our mentor and they do things correctly and the other people are not. and I think we need to remember that we can learn so much from so many different people, and then we come up with our own way that works the best for us. Okay, so what do you guys think? What is one way you will master this standard in your future classroom? All right, the fourth one is the learning principle. So we're going to adjust from basically focusing on the teacher to focusing on the student. How are your students learning? And this needs to be bigger than just showing your students how to do things. I think word problems are a big deal here. Can your students apply what you're teaching them? Also, can you help your students become autonomous learners? So my youngest is a seventh grader this year, and because of the COVID, the way things ended in spring of 2020, over the summer, I looked at all of his sixth grade standards and we went back through, and I just wanted to solidify that he really knew what he was doing. So now, as he's coming home from school, he's able to tell me, oh, I did such and such, and here's why it worked, and it does this. So he is becoming that autonomous learner because I spent the time with him to help him understand why things work, not just how to do things. I think that makes a big difference. Okay, so how are you going to master this one in your future classroom? All right, the next one is the assessment principle, and we're going to talk about this one for just a little while. Basically, assessment is a way for you to figure out information about your students, what they're learning, what they're not learning. Also, figure out information about yourself. What am I teaching well? What am I not teaching well? So it's important that you get a really good, well-rounded answer to this question. So that's why they're suggesting that you do multiple types of assessments. And we'll talk about that as the semester goes on. But a group of multiple choice questions, I can promise you, is not going to end up being your best bet. Sorry about that. Because multiple choice questions have their place, but there are certain things that are built into multiple choice questions that your students are not going to be able to show you that they've mastered the standard if that's all you do. On the other hand, if you do all multiple choice, I mean all fill in the blank, you have the same issue. You're not giving them a full picture of what, or not giving yourself a full picture of what your students can and cannot do. Okay, so give me an idea. How do you think you will master this standard in your future classroom? All right, and then the technology principle. So we talked about this just a little bit in class. Technology does not necessarily mean electronic, although obviously it can be. It's really important, that first bullet point there, that you are using your technology appropriately and responsibly. So allowing your sixth graders, your seventh graders to use calculators all the time is not responsible for in my opinion, for the most part. So in seventh grade, your students are supposed to be learning how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, for example. Well, if you allow them to use their calculator on that all the time, then when they get up to my class at Rock Hill High in 11th grade and I'm asking them to factor, and I say to them, okay, I need two numbers that multiply together to be negative 15 and add together to be positive 2. They are at a loss because they never actually learned how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers. They learned how to type that in their calculator. So you have to think about using that technology responsibly. When is it okay for the student to have a calculator? When is it not? And then the same thing with any other type of technology that you might use. I know one teacher was telling me that her students were just sick to death of creating PowerPoints. That's a great way for students to demonstrate what they learn, but not if that's all they do all the time. So any kind of technology can be overused if you allow it to become that. So just think about ways that you can use that technology well. We will talk about specifically calculator usage in class on another lesson. We'll also talk about some interactive geometry software. So there's lots of ways that technology can be used appropriately and can be used to help students deepen their understanding, as it talks about in your textbook on page 37, and not just as a replacement for basic understanding and intuition, which is what I'm talking about with the adding, subtracting, positive, and negative numbers. Okay, so you guys give me a sentence. How do you think you will master this standard in your future classroom? Okay, let's go back to assessment just for a second. I want to flip over to page 281 in your textbook. They've got this graphic there, and we're just going to fill it in the purposes for assessment. I want you to think about each one of these. I'm going to ask you a question at the end. So the first one is to promote growth. If you are assessing your students and you realize, wow, they are just doing awesome on this particular topic, but they are really stinking it up on this other one. So that maybe means you need to make some adjustments in how you're assessing. Maybe it means you need to make some adjustments on how you're teaching. Like there's lots of different ways you can look at that promotion of growth. That could be your students' growth, that could be your growth as a teacher. How can I help my students to learn this material the best? All right, and then moving around um, clockwise on that, the next one is improving instruction. So with that promotion of growth, if I look at this and I realize that my students already know how to do, to give a pretest, and I realize my students are already really good at finding positive and negative numbers on a number line. Well, I can improve my instruction for them by shortening that. Maybe I'm just going to do a quick review, make sure I fill in any potential gaps, and then I'm going to move forward into adding and subtracting of positive and negative numbers. On the other hand, if I give that pretest and I realize, oh my goodness, my students forgot so much over summer break, we need to go back and really talk about where the positive and negative numbers are on a number line before we even start talking about adding and subtracting. Then you have improved your instruction. You are going to be able to give them a much better lesson than you would have otherwise. So both the pretest and the post-test can promote growth and improve instruction for your students. Okay, another way, and I think this is one that we use a lot, is to recognize accomplishment. So at the end of the unit, we take the unit test, we do the unit project, and you get a grade. You get that 74. Okay, that means you learned a lot of the material, but you still have some growth to do. Or you get a 97. Wow, you aced this. Great job. You get a 52. You need to come back and let's talk about this again because there's a lot of this you don't understand. So you're recognizing where your students fall in that spectrum of I need a lot of help to wow, I've aced this and I'm ready to move on. So you're recognizing what they have accomplished and where they are on that continuum. And then the last one over there on the left-hand side, modify the program. So one thing we have talked about at Rock Hill High, we offer Algebra 2 as a one semester class. Do we need to maybe offer Algebra 2 as a two semester class for those that we identify as potentially struggling with Algebra 2? These people want to go to college. They want to be able to pass, say, college algebra, but they need a little bit of extra support in order to do that. So how can we modify our program so that we're meeting the needs of the students that are sitting in front of us? Okay, so I want you to look at these four things and then think about which of these you have control over as a classroom teacher, which of these you do not have control over as a classroom teacher. All right, and I will talk to y'all in the next video.